Have you ever wondered why, even when you try to become a better person, it seems there's something inside you that sabotages everything? That anger that flares up out of nowhere. The envy you swear you don't feel. The urge to run away when things start going right. Well, what if I told you that what you call your bad side might actually be your greatest power waiting to be discovered? It sounds crazy, but Carl Jung spent his life showing that the gold you've been searching for outside is actually hidden right there, in the side of you that you try to hide. We live in a culture that worships perfection. Instagram, motivational quotes, success coaches. Everyone wants to be light and positivity all the time. But nobody tells you that ignoring your shadow takes you further away from your true purpose. Depth psychology shows that it's not by pretending you're okay that life changes. It's by facing what's hidden with courage. Your shadow, according to Jung, isn't your enemy. It's a part of you that's been silenced, but it holds your instinct, your strength, your creativity, your truth. And what if I told you that looking at your shadow might be the step that unlocks a version of yourself you never even imagined? Because it's not about getting rid of the ugly parts. It's about integrating them, becoming whole. And today, you're going to find out how the unconscious mind works and why learning to deal with your shadow might be the greatest gift you can give yourself. Ready to flip the switch? There's something happening silently that nobody seems to notice. We're living in an epidemic of manufactured perfection. All it takes is 5 minutes scrolling through Instagram to see them. People who seem to have the dream life, the perfect relationships, the unbeatable routine. And then what happens? That inner whisper arises, telling you that you should be like that too. Except according to Carl Jung, the problem isn't that you're not perfect. The problem is trying to sustain a mask that doesn't represent who you really are. Depth psychology has already shown that this attempt to be always good, always strong, always right, is actually a well-decorated prison. And guess what it hides? Your shadow. The idea of an ideal self, and that flawless, polished character, is often a desperate response to the rejection we fear. Success culture applauds those who perform well, but rarely embraces those who stumble. This is where the collective unconscious comes into play. A field of invisible expectations molding our decisions without our awareness. The truth is, as long as we try to be someone we're not, we stifle what could make us unique. Have you noticed how even your laugh is more restrained in certain circles? Right. That's not just socialization, it's self-abandonment. And as Jung himself would say, what you reject most in yourself is probably what you need to integrate the most. The worst part is that this idealized self not only separates you from who you really are, it also distances you from others. After all, if you live on a stage, how can you expect genuine connection? And when this performance demands so much of you, there's hardly any space left to acknowledge your own emotions. Fear, anger, frustration, all of that goes straight down to your mind's basement. And guess what that basement is called? The shadow, according to Jung. A part you try to ignore, but that always manages to appear. And if I told you it's not your enemy, but your ticket to freedom, everyone carries an invisible backpack. What's inside it? Everything we hide, deny, and pretend we don't feel. The shadow, as Jung defined it, isn't just a poetic concept. It's a psychological fact. It represents all the parts of our personality that were rejected early on, because at some point, someone made us believe that it wasn't right to feel that way. When anger became a sin, ambition became selfishness, and vulnerability became weakness. Except, as Jung taught, what isn't accepted doesn't vanish. It just hides. And the more we shove it down, the stronger it grows inside. Want an example? You're having a bad day, someone cuts you off in traffic, and you blow up. 10 minutes later, guilt sets in. I shouldn't have reacted that way. But what if that reaction is exactly a sign that something inside you is crying out for attention? Carl Jung used to say that the shadow isn't evil, it's ignored. And what is ignored becomes dangerous. When you feel envy, jealousy, competitiveness, or even satisfaction at someone else's misfortune, you think that makes you a horrible person, right? But hold on. These impulses don't define you. They simply show you that you're human, and that there are parts of you longing to be seen, understood, and transformed. The big turning point is realizing that the shadow is actually an invitation, not a sentence. Everyone has one, even the most spiritually evolved. The difference is that some face it head on, while others keep trying to look enlightened, stumbling over their own darkness. The unconscious mind isn't our enemy. It holds pain, yes, but it also holds potential. Jung used to say, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And if you start paying attention to your impulses, your judgments, your discomfort, maybe you'll see that the map of your growth is already inside you. It might even be screaming silently, trying to show you something bigger than yourself. The shadow doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, through hasty judgments, silent comparisons, and small self-sabotages disguised as distractions. You know when you're about to start something important but decide to just check social media real quick? Next thing you know, an hour's gone by. The unconscious mind is masterful at creating emotional shortcuts, and if you're not paying attention, it drives your life on autopilot. While you barely notice, you're no longer at the wheel. Carl Jung used to say that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. There's that one friend who always irritates you. But is it really them, or is it the mirror they represent? Once, someone told me they felt angry at freeloaders. When we dug deeper, they realized that deep down they envied the courage those people had to ask for help, something they could never allow themselves. That's the game of Jung's archetypes. We see ourselves in others all the time, especially in the parts we refuse to see in ourselves. Depth psychology helps us recognize these projections as signals, not threats. When you feel that seemingly irrational discomfort with someone, it might be the shadow nudging you. Hey, pay attention to this inside. Another classic symptom, that paralyzing perfectionism, it's not really high standards, it's fear. Fear of making mistakes, of being criticized, of not being enough. And that voice comes from the part of you that's never felt safe to fail. You say you want to change your life, but you sabotage each step, come up with excuses, and procrastinate. Deep down, you're ashamed of it. But guess what? That's also the shadow. Integrating these fragments is more than self-knowledge, it's self-rescue. When you begin acknowledging them, you also start rewriting your own story. Then a dilemma arises. Is it better to repress or integrate these troubling parts? Repressing emotions is like sweeping dirt under the rug. It looks clean at first glance, but the smell eventually gives it away. Society trained us to do this. Don't cry, never show weakness, stay strong. And little by little, we fill our emotional basement with parts of ourselves clamoring for recognition. Carl Jung saw this as one of the greatest dangers of modern life. When we pretend these emotions don't exist, they don't disappear. They morph into headaches, anxiety attacks, sudden anger outbursts, and even psychosomatic illnesses. The unconscious mind always finds a way to express itself. Integrating, on the other hand, is an act of courage. It's not about justifying toxic attitudes or romanticizing flaws. It's about looking within and saying, I see you. It's recognizing that your anger has a reason, that your fear has a root cause. When you sit quietly with these emotions, without judgment, you start to notice something amazing. They change. You know that sense of relief after an honest conversation. The same thing happens inside you when the shadow is heard. Jung's depth psychology doesn't promise miracles, but it gives us keys. And one of these keys is the radical acceptance of who you are, shadow and all. Of course, integrating takes effort. It requires presence, but the cost of continuing to repress is much higher. It's like trying to keep an emotional dam from bursting, not noticing it's about to overflow. The shadow, according to Jung, isn't the villain of the story. It's the exiled part of your strength. Integrating it is like inviting that side to sit at the table with you rather than keeping it locked in the basement. When you do this, something changes. A new inner space emerges, and with it, the possibility of real transformation. The next inevitable question is, how do you explore this territory without getting lost? You don't need a retreat in the Himalayas to start exploring your shadow. 5 minutes a day, with honesty and willingness, is enough to make a difference. One of the simplest, most powerful tools is keeping a journal. Write by hand, unfiltered, everything you're feeling, even if it seems absurd, ugly, or childish. Questions like, what have I been avoiding feeling lately? Or, which criticism deeply annoys me, and why, can shine a light into the unconscious. Carl Jung believed that self-knowledge begins when we give form to what was once invisible. And writing is a way of giving form. Another transformative practice is conscious feedback. Ask a trusted friend what they think is holding you back from growing, and listen without getting defensive. Sometimes, what we most need to hear comes with a bit of discomfort, and that discomfort points precisely to the shadow in Jung's view. You can also use everyday observation as practice. For instance, when someone deeply irritates you, ask, what does this reveal about me? It seems simple, but with consistency, you start to understand how the unconscious mind works, and where it tries to shield you with masks that no longer serve you. If you resonate with spiritual practices, meditation combined with conscious breathing can help you access even deeper layers. You don't have to start with an hour. 3 minutes can be enough to begin. If you'd like to go further, books like The Red Book by Carl Jung or The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle offer valuable insights on shadow integration and the awakening of presence. The important thing is to start, because the more you reach these inner places, the more you realize that even the most uncomfortable emotions can be your allies. And speaking of which, have you ever considered that even the emotions you like the least could be your allies? For a long time, we've been taught to run from these emotions like they're monsters, anger, envy, laziness. But the truth is, according to Jung, what we avoid the most usually holds what we most need. Anger, for example, is the voice of your integrity being violated. It's a cry for boundaries. When we ignore that signal, we end up swallowing our feelings and smiling on the outside while corroding ourselves on the inside. Now, when we listen to anger attentively, it teaches us to be assertive. Jungian depth psychology understands that every emotion has a function, and anger's function is to protect. It's like an inner guard dog. Ignoring that is leaving the door wide open for resentment to move in. Envy also carries powerful clues. When someone triggers that bitter feeling in you, instead of blaming yourself, ask, what does this person have that I secretly wish I had too? Envy, in that sense, becomes a compass, pointing to unacknowledged desires, maybe freedom, self-confidence, or professional success. Jung believed that rather than denying these emotions, we should dance with them, because they contain creative energy. Integrating envy is recognizing that you too can, and perhaps should, pursue what you admire in others. And laziness, so often criticized, is sometimes just disguised exhaustion. It's your body trying to tell you, hey, you're going too far, too fast. In a society driven by productivity, slowing down is almost a sin. But what looks like laziness may be a necessary break to reorganize your inner chaos. How does the unconscious mind work in that case? It speaks through tiredness, discouragement, procrastination, not out of ill will, but because something's off. And when you allow yourself to hear these messages, you realize that even the heaviest shadows can illuminate, especially when it comes to how you connect with others. Have you ever felt certain conflicts keep repeating, almost like an emotional loop? The sort of argument that always starts the same way, with lines like, you never understand me, or I just want to be heard. Well, guess what? Many times this has nothing to do with the other person, but with the shadow, according to Jung. When we don't acknowledge our own internal wounds, we end up projecting onto others what we haven't yet resolved within ourselves. Carl Jung called this projection an unconscious mechanism, where we see on the outside what's really inside. And then, instead of resolving, we blame. For instance, if you're bothered by people who act bossy, maybe there's a repressed part of you that would like to make more decisions. If cold people get on your nerves, maybe you don't allow yourself to be more rational when you need to be. Jung explains that these reactions are mirrors, uncomfortable, but revealing. It's as if the other person were pushing buttons we didn't even know we had. And as long as we don't acknowledge that, we keep communicating from a place of defense, fear, and rigidity. The result? Superficial relationships, constant misunderstandings, and a loneliness that can't be fixed by mere company. But when we start noticing these patterns, and more than that, owning them, that's when the magic happens. Communication changes. It comes with more pauses, more presence, more listening. You stop reacting and start responding. You begin saying things like, that hurt me because there's something in me that's still hurting. And you know what happens? The other person lowers their guard too. The unconscious mind loves a stage, but it transforms when it finds a safe space to express itself. And when you start expressing yourself with that awareness, even at work, the masks begin to fall. In the professional environment, the shadow wears a suit and tie, and often a well-practiced smile. It appears as perfectionism disguised as excellence, fear of failure masquerading as responsibility, and envy that emerges when a colleague gets promoted before you. Carl Jung said that the more we ignore the shadow, the more it seeps into areas of our life where we're expected to perform. And where there's constant pressure, there's also emotional repression. Jungian depth psychology shows that the desire to be flawless can actually hide a brutal fear of rejection. Some people show up earlier, stay later, and still feel inadequate. It might look like dedication, but sometimes it's just an escape. Escaping from looking at yourself, from realizing that your identity is tied to how much you produce, and that's exhausting. The unconscious mind starts whispering little by little, first with a lack of motivation, then anxiety, until it becomes chronic exhaustion. You know that meeting where you froze up when giving your opinion? Maybe it wasn't just insecurity. Maybe it was your shadow's voice saying, you're not allowed to fail. But what if you were? When we integrate the shadow at work, we gain something rare: authenticity. You start recognizing your limits without guilt, praising others without competing, saying no without fear. And that changes everything. Even your boss notices the difference, because when you're whole, your work stops being just a task. It becomes an expression. Jung used to say that work can be a fertile field for inner growth, and if that's your field, maybe it's time to stop pretending everything's fine and start living more fully. Because in the end, this journey isn't about job titles, it's about courage. The courage to become who you really are. Every hero's journey starts in chaos. Not when everything is clear, when everything seems to be falling apart. At that moment, life gives you a push that feels like punishment, but it's actually an invitation. Carl Jung viewed this as the unconscious calling. Your soul is asking to be heard. The truth is, the hero's journey doesn't just happen in movies. It happens when you decide to stop running from yourself. Jungian psychology calls this the individuation process, the path of becoming who you are rather than who you were taught to be. And guess who's waiting for you on that road? Your shadow. Remember that moment you thought, I can't live like this anymore? That's where the crossing begins. It's like in The Lion King when Simba has to face his past to take what's rightfully his. Or like in The Matrix, when Neo chooses the red pill and decides to see reality with no filters. The hero, in Jung's view, isn't the one who slays monsters out there. It's the one who faces the monsters inside. Every pain, every conflict, every crisis is part of this bigger script. The collective unconscious is full of these stories, and your story can inspire others too. But nobody travels alone. The hero always meets mentors, allies, signs along the way. Sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's an unexpected conversation, maybe even a video like this one. And when you start finding meaning in what used to feel like chaos, you realize you were being guided all along. Carl Jung used to say that what we deny subjugates us, but what we accept transforms us. And that transformation starts when you accept being the protagonist of your own rebuilding process, because living with purpose isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to ask the next right question. Living with purpose isn't following a perfect plan or always getting it right. It's having the courage to be whole, with flaws, scars, and everything the world told you was too much. Carl Jung used to say that what we avoid most in ourselves might contain the gold of our soul. Living with purpose is exactly that, stopping trying to appear to be someone else and starting to be who you already are. Jung teaches us that purpose isn't something found on the outside, but something that emerges from within as you integrate the forgotten parts of your essence. A lot of people think purpose is some grand mission, something noble or revolutionary. But in practice, it can be as simple as learning to say no, embracing your authenticity, or choosing a path nobody else understands. But that makes sense to you. At that moment, the unconscious mind begins to cooperate instead of sabotaging you, because it senses that you're finally being honest with it. And when you honor your shadows, your desires, your boundaries, something shifts in your environment. The outside world starts responding differently, as though it's saying, now we're talking, now you're ready. Carl Jung believed the greatest gift we can give humanity is to become whole. And that takes courage. The courage to look in the mirror and see both the light and the darkness, and keep going anyway. Because in the end, living with purpose isn't about fitting in, it's about expanding. Which leaves us with the question, what part of you is still in the shadows? And might be exactly what you need to live more authentically. Now that you understand how your shadow holds the keys to your growth, the question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you keep trying to fit into the mold you were given, stifling your truth? Or will you have the courage to look within and discover the power hiding in the parts you conceal? The truth is, there is no real transformation without integrity. And being whole means having the audacity to embrace everything you are, including what you were taught to reject. Think about it. How many opportunities have you lost because you were afraid of being judged? How many times have you stayed silent so as not to cause trouble? How many parts of yourself are still in the dark, waiting for you to say, I see you? Carl Jung said that what we don't face within ourselves, we'll encounter as fate out there. In other words, change doesn't start in the world, it starts in you. And maybe, just maybe, your life is on the verge of a shift. All it takes is one step, one choice, one decision. So tell me, which part of your shadow are you ready to integrate today? Comment down below, let's talk. Because growth might hurt, but growing together is lighter. And if this content lit a spark in you, share it with someone else who's searching for meaning too. Oh, and don't forget, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell, because this journey of self-knowledge and depth psychology is only just beginning, and I want to take it with you.